Bonjour ou bonsoir à
Good morning or good afternoon, good evening to all participants. My name is Solange Slack at the OIV Press Organization. It's a great pleasure with the Director General of OIV, Mr. Pau Roca, to welcome you to this web press conference presenting the 2021 wine production results. We are in Paris at the OIV headquarters, where it's 3 o'clock. Some 600 people have indicated their interest in these figures, and OIV, as a scientific and technical expert in the vitivinicultural sector, is very happy to share this information with you. All of the documents are available in the resource section of the internet site, and you can see, in fact, review the conference tomorrow on the site as well. So this press conference is in fact interpreted simultaneously in French, English, and Spanish. You can choose your language on clicking on the icon corresponding to your language, or you can hear the original version. The Director General will speak in the three different languages, one after the other. In case of any problem, you need to refresh the page. As far as the question and answer period, it will be moderated by Roger Puig, who is responsible for press, and you will have, in fact, Giorgio De Grosso and Risha Gandhi, who will be answering the questions as well. I give the floor to the Director General. Good afternoon or good evening to all those who are following us in this video press conference. I would like to thank you for your interest in discovering the production figures that we are presenting at this part of the year. These figures, in fact, must help all of those involved in the decision-making in the vitivinicultural policies by member states, regions, organizations managing this sector. I would like to greet all of the responsible people, decision makers at different levels who are making difficult decisions in accordance with the partners and producers, and this with a view of the market. I hope that this data will enable us to enlighten you and contribute to make the market more transparent. I'm going to switch to English for the presentation.
To you these first estimates of the wine production of 2021, as we usually do in this period of the year. First, I want to say that the data I'm going to show refers to wine production exclusively, excluding must and juices, and that the data of 2021 and 2020 are still preliminary and provisional respectively, and therefore potentially subject to change. As you know, for official statistics, it takes between 2 or 3 years to be consolidated. I'm going to start by the Southern Hemisphere with a production this year of 59 million hectoliters that records the highest wine production ever, representing 23% of the expected world production. So after a strong decline last year caused by unfavorable climatic conditions, 2021 production has seen a sharp increase among all the major producing countries in that hemisphere, as we will see in the next slide, country by country. You see Australia with 14.2 million hectoliters, which means 30% compared to the 2020 and 14% more than the average of 5 years. Chile, with 13.4 million hectoliters, is the largest producer in South America in this year, 2021, with an increase, as you see, in the lower part of 30% compared to 2020. After a very low production in Argentina, we see 12.5 million hectoliters, marking 16% increase from 2021 to 2020. And in South Africa, wine production in 2021 10.6 million hectoliters. Is the third year consecutive in continuous growth after a prolonged period of drought, which started in 2016. Brazil has maybe the highest estimated percentage of increase, with 60% with respect to the last year, but with a total of 3.6 million hectoliters. And on the other side, we have the only country that does not increase but reduces its production, which is New Zealand, with 2.7 million hectoliters, which is almost at 20% lower than the previous year and 13% below the 5-year average. In the Northern Hemisphere, we will look first at the European Union, where weather conditions significantly impacted the expected 2021 wine production, estimated at 145 million hectoliters. This volume shows an annual decrease of 22 million hectoliters compared to 2020. Nevertheless, the European Union continues to be very important, with 58% of the world wine production. Let's see what happens country by country. The year 2021 proved to be very unfortunate for wine production in the three largest EU producing countries, Italy, Spain, and France, which together account for 45% of the world and 79% of the EU production. And this is mainly due to late frost and at the beginning of April. Italy, with 44.5 million hectoliters, estimates a drop of 9%, but it continues to be the largest producer in the world. Spain, this year, is expected to be the second largest wine producing country in the world, and with an estimate of 35 million hectoliters, this level is 14% lower than last year. And France, with 34.2 million hectoliters, experienced a disastrous vintage, with severe frost in April, followed by summer rains, hailstorms, and mildew infections. Consequently, there is a drop of 27% compared to 2020, and one of the lowest volumes ever recorded. Moving on to the other EU members that are also quite important. This is, you will see Germany with 8.8 million hectoliters. Portugal stays more or less at the same level with 6.5 million hectoliters. Romania, interesting to see here that there is a high volatility, and this year they are increasing by 37% and 29% above the last 5-year average, with 5.3 million hectoliters. Hungary, with a small increase. Austria, more or less the same. And Greece, it's with 1.7 million hectoliters, experiences almost a 30% of reduction. I think also it's worth noting the rest of European countries. Bulgaria with 0.9 million hectoliters. Croatia, has reduced to 0.7. Czech Republic, more or less the same. Slovenia reduces its production. Slovakia, more or less the same. And in the Northern Hemisphere, we continue to see other countries. The USA, the preliminary estimate is 24.1 million hectoliters. USA has been very stable, normally in wine production, but this year, this figure is 6% higher compared to the last year, which was characterized by a relatively low harvest due to the wildfires and smoke taint. However, the production, as you will see, even if it's a 6% higher, it's 3% lower than the 5 years average. China, we have to say that for China, There is no data now, as always in this time of the year. Data on grapes harvest in China is not available. However, wine production is likely to continue to contraction that started in 2016 for structural reasons that we outlined in previous press conferences. In the Eastern European countries, the scenario is overall quite positive. You see Russia here with 4.5 million hectoliters, Georgia with an important increase of 22% compared to the last year, Moldova with 1.1 million hectoliters, and Switzerland 0.8 million hectoliters. This is small production, but also it has a 10% reduction compared to the last year, and it's the lowest volume in 20 years. So it's worth to mention that it's also due to bad weather, notably from the frost after the month of April, followed also by hail and then mildew hitting the crops in the midsummer. Now, based on this information, we see that our estimates are between 247 million hectoliters and 253 million hectoliters, with a mid-range estimate at 250 million hectoliters. So the 2021 wine production can be considered extremely low, only slightly above the historical small production of 2017. This year, expected volume seems to have fallen by 4% compared to 2020, which was already below the average. As we have seen, this is the result of adverse climatic conditions that severely impacted the major wine-producing countries in Europe this year, only partially balanced by the very good performance of the countries in the Southern Hemisphere. This is the third year in a row that the world wine production is below average. However, the impact of this downfall for the global wine sector is yet to be evaluated, given the relatively high degree of volatility and uncertainty that COVID-19 pandemic has generated. I'm going to switch now to Spanish and to present my final conclusions. El año dos
Now, 2020 was a year of reactions, but 2021 will be a year where we leave, in fact, emergency answers behind us, and we will focus on planning for the future. The world post-COVID will not be the same as the one we knew at the beginning of 2020, in fact. Normally, the vitiviniculture sector has reacted better in fact, vis-a-vis the crisis. If we look back during the first month of the pandemic, most of the analysts announce a very negative scenario for the vitivinicultural sector around the world. Because, in fact, there is this big dependence vis-a-vis the hotel, restaurant, cafe sector and exports. But we have seen an extraordinary ability to adapt to the change. The sector, in fact, has resisted, but on top of that, it has been very creative to overcome the crisis, the pandemic. Now, in fact, we can therefore look at the future with some optimism. Now, many wineries and distributors suffered, in fact, big financial losses. But at the same time, this crisis, in fact, extraordinarily stimulated innovation, digital innovation, diversification in the distribution channels. For example, we have seen the turn, a massive, an immediate turn to e-commerce in this sector. And in fact, we saw that the online sales are very appropriate for consumers. They're able to buy, review, discover wines, in fact. And we can say that
on the overall beverage market, wine represents 14%. But if we look at the online channel, we can talk about a 40% share. This according to IWSR. This channel generates, in fact, revenues, a greater reach, more engagement from consumers. Now, as we have seen, the sector, though, is confronted to big problems, other problems than the pandemic, and this is the climatic changes. The climatic changes, in fact, are occurring on a regular basis. And in fact, it is time to stop reacting with emergency measures to the catastrophe. It is time to try and anticipate on all these climatic changes and anomalies. Because, you know, vis-a-vis the climate change, we won't have a vaccine available. Now, in fact, we have therefore to find solution. At OIV, we understand that it is very important to provide guidance to the sector so that it can meet the important issues ahead. And in fact, we have 3 out of our 6 strategic axes in our strategic plan that are devoted to sustainability and to issues connected to climate change. Now, we should not underestimate the role that can be played by digitalization to help find solutions to the problem. In these recent years, in fact, we have done a lot of research and many initiatives have been taken in this sector. For example, we, in fact, were interested to hear about the MedGold project that is carried out by the European Union and private companies. In this project, in fact, well, it's a platform that processes and analyzes data from the Copernicus satellite in order to offer agroclimatic services and supply information to help people predict climate variability changes and improve the decision making to try and face the challenges. Now, I would also like to mention that OIV has the pleasure to announce a scientific initiative connected to this topic. On the 24th of November, we organize a digital symposium online that will focus on the challenges, opportunities, and future scenario of digital transformation in the vine and wine sector. Now, of course, I invite you all to participate in this event. Once again, it's on November 24 this year. Now, the focus of the press conference today talked about wine production, but I would like to share some insight concerning consumption trends that we, in fact, expect for 2021. Now, the forecasting demand today is quite difficult because of the after effects of COVID-19, which has led to recessions, to the interruption of traveling, of tourism, and lasting changes in purchasing behavior. But we still expect the global consumption to increase compared to 2020, even though the drop in the consumption in China could in fact have a permanent effect on the overall global consumption. But we expect a rebound to come back to the levels before the pandemic. Concerning international trade, in fact, well, we see data, international trade data, that point in that direction. Now, at the global level, international trade gives positive signs. And we see that the disruption in the supply chain, in fact, are coming back to normal. And we can say that during the first semester, we have seen a 9% increase in the volume compared to the first 6 months last year, and a 21% increase in value. Now, what is more surprising is if we compare, in fact, the first semester with 2019. And here we see an increase of 4% in volume in 2021 compared to 2019 and 6% in value, in fact. So this means, in fact, that we are doing better than the pre-pandemic level. Now, there's also the wine per category. For example, the sparkling wines. Here we see a big increase, and especially, in fact, with the return of champagne on the market. We, in fact, foresee 305 million bottles. So once again, we are coming back to former levels and even doing better than before. Now, there is also wine tourism that has greatly suffered during COVID-19. It had a huge impact on international traveling of tourists. And in fact, the World Tourism Organization, in fact, calculated that tourism had dropped by 70% compared to 2019. Now, the sellers who had relied a lot on this wine tourism suffered greatly. Despite that, the situation, is getting back to normal in many regions of the world, so we can hope that wine tourism will come back to its former levels. Now, it is important to keep an eye on wine tourism and the economic impact on rural development. Now, I must say that I'm proud to say that during the last conference on wine tourism, in fact, that took place in Alentejo, OIV had established a cooperation with the World Tourism Organization of the United Nations in order to establish a common framework that will make it possible to monitor closely the phenomenon of wine tourism on a global scale. So this is, in fact, the conclusion of my intervention, and I am now ready to answer your questions. Thank you.
Muchas gracias al director. Buenos días, buenas tardes a todos.
Thank you to the director. Thank you to everyone. We're going to start with the question and answer. So I'd like to say that you can send, in fact, your questions through the chat in the different languages, and I will read them out loud. So we hope that you will all be able to continue asking questions. And we have Benoit, in fact, who is very much, if he would like to know whether the other countries have been really hit by a lack of wine like France. Thank you very much for your question. Yes, there has been a reduction in production, but we cannot say that there will be a shortage, in fact, because there is inventory. And we need to take into account also the consumption figures during the COVID period. And as far as France is concerned, yes, indeed, it was especially hit because there was a real reduction. It is, in fact, the lowest production year since 1957, it would appear. So that in itself is a indication of the magnitude of the phenomenon.
Change as regular events and not anomalies. What would your message be to producers to navigate such scenarios, and how could they do better going forward?
Well, as I said, it's prediction and also using all the tools that we may have. In fact, what we are having with digitalization, it's an enormous capacity to get data, to obtain data. By using intelligence viticulture, we're having more data than we can digest. So with artificial intelligence and with capacity to digest all this data, we can have tools for anticipating and in order to reduce the adverse effects of this phenomenon. At the same time, I think it's important to say that there are many ways to contribute to adaptation. There is the plant, Vitis vinifera, is so adaptable, and we have so many varieties, and the genetics of the plant is so diverse that we can work on that a lot. At the same time, there are practices, cultural practices that we can implement. So we have a lot of tools, and no worries, there is no delocalization of the sector. That's not going to happen.
Thank you. And we have our first question from the Southern Hemisphere. She's called Maria Elena, and she writes us from Argentina. Do you see the e-commerce phenomenon competing with and substituting sales from its on-trade counterparts in the long term?
Of course, all channels are competing one with the other, but I think it's not a matter of only looking at the share that I'm taking from e-commerce. Can be more creative, and I think we are addressing the product to a different area, a new market. So it contributes to enlarge the market. E-commerce is not only taking maybe some parts of the share of the other channels, but mainly I think we are contributing to acquire more dimension.
Thank you. Another question from a neighbor country, from Argentina. Buenos días desde Chile. Por acá, María José.
Hello from Chile. My name is Jose Blanco from Forbes. I would like to know how we could predict the damage provoked by climate change, and secondly, how has the pandemic affected the industry? You know that the climate change has indeed occurred. We see it, all of us see it, and I must say that we have never closed our eyes to the question of climate change, but it's true that in the last 5 years, we have had both the best and worst of harvests. So the amplitude and the scattering of the data has increased. And this, in fact, can be linked to these successive meteorological phenomena, which are more and more extreme. And then, of course, COVID-19 has also weighed heavily on this sector, as I have already said. This is a sector in which a large share of the business is achieved in the HoReCa sector. And these establishments were closed for months. Consequently, the results of these companies were strongly affected by these conditions. Thank you very much. Let's continue with questions in the Hispanic world. Mr. Ramon Cincos, are you optimistic as far as the renewal of the wine and vine trade shows? At the worst time in the pandemic, they were eliminated. Yes, we are very optimistic. We see that consumption is resuming, and this is something we can see in the exports. In the 6 months we have observed, we were able to note that the tools that we have, the marketing tools, the commercial tools that we have, are a whole range of tools extremely useful for the sector. And you know that the wine shows and wine-related events all are enabling the market to pick up again. Now, I believe that there is a great deal of room for virtual events as well. But in any case, wine, it has to be tasted. It is a product that needs to be shared, and this is done physically. In French, France, a question from France with regards to the 2021 vintage. That was an exceptional year. In fact, could it be the standard for the impact on the sector with the climate conditions? Does OIV reflect on this? Let me stress that this is a moment in time where we have observed this these phenomena are going to continue. The situation, in fact, is not stable. What we see is the destabilization of this phenomenon, which is contributing to catastrophic situations. Now, what is our vision? I would like to stress the fact that the sector will have to adapt. We see that the sector is adapting. It is resistant. It is resisting. It is resilient. It is creative. And at the same time, there are tools that can be used to work and to predict events, and these services and tools will have to be put in the service of the wine growers so that they can benefit from this information available, so that the information be useful. At the same time, there is the vine's capacity and the diversity which has been created by mankind, and man will continue to develop and exploit that wealth, that richness that exists.
We have another question. Does the OIV has an educated guess or a precise assessment on the development of the consumption? It's a question from China.
Can you repeat that?
Does the OIV has an educated guess or a precise assessment on the development of the consumption?
We have seen the consumption is increasing, but I don't see China coming back too soon to this to the recovery of the wine consumption. So maybe considering this, I will pass this question to Giorgio Del Grosso.
Thank you, Mr. Director General. So in this period of the year, it is quite difficult to make educated guesses on the evolution of consumption, and so we will give you a more definitive answer during our next press conference in April 2022. But still, the first signals that we're receiving from international trade data, for example, are quite positive. So last year, we forecasted a -3% on wine consumption at the global level. We think that the majority of countries will see a rebound in their pre-pandemic consumption levels. But as the Director General was suggesting, we think that China might not return to pre-pandemic levels. So taking all these into considerations, we think that for 2021, we could see a +2% with respect to 2020. And the difference, this 1% difference, could be linked to China. Thank you.
Thank you, Giorgio. We are going back to Spain because España, Vicente Escamilla nos pregunta.
So we have a question from Spain. The 250 million hectoliters foreseen, is that enough to answer the needs of the market? And at what level would there be a balance? No, we are not at all pessimistic with regards to this, because first of all, we are aware of the inventory levels around 1.4, 1.7, around 1.4 to 1.5 years of inventory which has been stocked. In addition to that, we are going to have a year where consumption will be lower. So the fact that we have a reduced harvest will, in fact, not have a major impact because of these two factors. So we have another question from a Spanish speaker. Rafa del Reino has a question. This year, in fact, we could be faced with a strong drop in production, first hypothesis, or second hypothesis could be a strong rebound in the market following the crisis. So what could be the impact on prices and on premium wines in the world? Thank you for that question, Rafa. I think that this is a good question, but I don't have a real concrete answer to give you here. Now, it is possible that we continue with a greater segmentation of the market. And as far as supply demand is concerned, specialization can increase here. And consequently, the weight of the different price segmentation levels could in fact balance out, and this could perhaps lead to an opening via the more premium wines. Thank you very much. You can study this in the expert groups that you are in.
Paris from New Zealand. How can digitalization help limit the impacts of climate change?
This is very, I thank you for this question, because this allows me to insist on this idea, and that digitalization, it's the way to render the data into information. Partly is that. Also, we have other things in digitalization, but having data science is very important, and artificial intelligence also. So with this, we can make this information that it's available, because there is lots of information also because of digitalization, because of intelligent ways of cultivation, and because of sensors. We have many sensors now in the vineyard, and all this data and all the historical data of climate that I said, for example, for Medgold, the Medgold project is an enormous quantity of data that then can be transformed into practical anticipation, forecasting at very small levels, at a few acres. It's very important, because this will be very practical for producers. So this is the way to face, to anticipate the catastrophes that can happen. No? And I think this is part of it's not a solution, it's just prevention. Solutions will come from adapting the vineyards to climate change. That's long-term solutions, will be genetical adaptation.
Thank you. We have more on the same topic. Chris Lush is asking us, when you talk about vine diversity combating climate change, do you mean planting different varieties in existing areas, perhaps including more hybrid varieties?
Not exactly. You know, diversity can be within the same variety. And you have polyclonal, and you have muscle selection. You know, you have all sorts of responses that you can find in the biology of one species, and within that species in one variety. So let's work on that. Also, of course, we cannot close our eyes to the progress of science. And I think it's time to also adopt other systems of adapting the genome of the vine to the necessities. But polyclonal selection, it's one of the ways, and we can see also many intravarietal, very good performing clones. So there are all sorts, it's so diverse. We are getting into a world that it's fascinating.
Thank you. Jesús, ¿un plan estratégico para la recuperación en el
I think, is there something which is strategic for the recovery, in fact, of tourism as far as the future is concerned? Well, thank you for that question. You know that even though we have yet to incorporate this as an axis, a work axis in our strategic plan, we have taken into account enotourism because enotourism helps to develop the rural world. And this wine tourism is really a champion for maintaining the territories, for preserving these zones, to continue to give them value. And this thanks to the economic returns from this type of tourism for these areas which sometimes are far away. Enotourism is able to recover a great number of these aspects. What's important for OIV and for the World Tourism Organization is the measure, that is to say, the scope, the dimension, the movements and trends in this enotourism. And this so as to try to see how we can bring services. And what's important is to first understand, analyze, and then interpret. Thank you very much. I would like to remind you that you can continue to send us your questions via the chat in the official languages here. You know that here at OIV headquarters, we will try to continue to answer all the questions that you are asking. So, you know that now the question we have now is from France. Are there any distinctions between red wine, white wine, and rosé in terms of the supply and demand in the future sales and marketing campaign? Can we speak of a potential shortage of white wine? Thank you. Thank you for this question as well. It's very relevant. I think that it especially affects France more than other countries. It's true that there could be a shortage of white wine. You know that the white wine inventory is lower than red wine. This is a general rule. And I think that this is the case for France as well. Let me say that we are analyzing this subject, and next April we will have a better idea of the situation. So maybe I could give the floor now to. All right. I would like to give the floor. We need to remember, though, that this year there will be a good production in the southern hemisphere, which is a large white wine producer. So that is a good bit of news. And this is an opportunity to discover the southern hemisphere wines, white wines. Jojo del Grosso, I'll give you the floor with regards to the difference between these wines and the specific study that we will have here. We don't.
Yeah, at UAV, as you might know, we have 3 or 4 publications that we publish every year, and one publication is an ad hoc study. Every year it's different. So last year we developed a very interesting report on the evolution of the global organic vineyard. That is a study of the last 15 years of the evolution of the organic vineyard in 64 countries, that I invite you, by the way, to download on our website. And for 2022, the idea is to publish a report on the market of white wines. So we are in a phase of data collection and research at the moment, and we'll be happy to share the preliminary results of the study at the next press conference. April 2022. Thank you.
So more data coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Giorgio. We have a question, the first from the United States. Do you think organic waste on production could provide a solution? Could you provide some insights on your latest organic vineyards publication? I think it's a question that has been answered. I don't know if you have any other things to say.
Just to say that for what I recall, I think we have a 6% surface on organic wines, so there is a lot of room to increase. Okay, so there is room to improve.
Thank you. We have a question from Lisa from the UK. What are the structural reasons for China's decline?
I think we are facing a moment in China in which there is an increase in economy, but it's not at the same rate that it was before. So there was a lot of optimism, an excess of positiveness, and what we're foreseeing, it's a reality of what is happening in China is that its economy is not increasing at the same level as before. So this is one factor. Then also that maybe we are seeing a restructuring of the strategy of China going into more quality. And this is probably, and I see that because of the Ningxia pilot zone that they are promoting, and they are investing a lot in that. So they are really trying to do their best in improving their quality and in adapting their production sites and soils and studying the edaphology, and I think they are going to surprise the rest of the world in the future with producing very, very good wines, which was not the case a few years ago. So, and this doesn't happen together with producing a lot of massive wine. So I think they are maturing. Chinese producers are going in a way of crafting their wines and adapting their wines to the demand in a way that many other countries have done in the past. And they are following their own way. They are on their own way, and we will see what this comes in the future. Let's wait and see. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roca. We have one last question before wrapping up this and ending this press conference. It is from Federico Castellucci. He's asking, are you of the opinion that the cisgenic viticulture with more resistant vines can be a good support for real new sustainability of vitiviniculture?
Thank you, and I say hello to one of my predecessors, Federico Castellucci. This is a moment in which we have to open our minds, and we are facing a very important moment because climate change is it's causing some disasters already, but the principal thing is not delocalizing our vineyard. It is very important that the value of our sites, of the vitiviniculture spaces, and they stay there where they are, because I think they have a big value, and the capacity of all the vineyard to adapt its goes sometimes to this transgenic or inclusion. CRISPR has, well, the method of inclusion of some genes into the genome has won the last Nobel Prize. This is very important. So let's be open to all solutions. And this is a matter in which science will tell us the way to follow. Thank you.